and figuring out how to get the damn ball rolling.
Yes.
Welcome back to the Writing Inquisition. I'm Carol Benton.
I'm Marie Allen.
I'm Rosalie.
And this episode we're going to be talking about probably one of the big pains in the butt, and that is the beginning of your story. So, first question is, how did you decide to start?
Well, originally the first, when I first got the idea, it was a prologue, because I'd had this idea, and then it just came out as a contest entry, because it was write about the book that you want to write. So it was kind of like a summary of the first scene. Well, actually, I expanded it into the prologue, thinking, well, how'd you get there? And I've changed it since I cut out, the whole plot point for it, because it was just in the beginning of the book, and I never used it again, and I thought, well, why am I even having it in the first place? Yeah. So now, I don't really know, it helps I have a really big conflict in my book, so I was thinking, well, it should start with that, or at least before it.
But fairly close before it.
Yeah. So what I basically did is I was feeling really frustrated with the prologue, being like, I don't know where to start it, what should be happening, and I just kind of opened up a blank document and went with my gut, basically, and what came out is the beginning of the book. I'm fairly content with where it is.
A few drafts later.
That's a good sign. And I still need to fix it and stuff, but the opening scene I'm pretty content with, even though a lot of people have been like, well, maybe you should take a couple chapters and be in the world, and I'm kind of like, nah. Don't wanna, because it'd be boring.
It's wasted space.
It's wasted space. I just need to figure out how to convey information better, is basically what I'm struggling with. Anyway, my point being, I like to start beginnings with, not with a bang, and not in media res, because I feel like you need to, know the characters.
Yeah, you need to know what the hell
Because if there's
you're
a bunch
first.
of action in, nobody's gonna care, because they don't know the characters.
Right.
Or, have some sort of... Anyway, my point being, I like to start off with, some sort of conflict or something the character's struggling with, and hopefully to get it across enough that you care and you're not just kind of well, I don't really care. I had notes, so let me see.
I agree with that point.
Yeah.
Because I've always kind of I have written pieces of first draft and stuff, and I always thought, okay, it needs to start off with action, because that was all the advice I ever got.
Yeah.
And
it's hook your reader and...
Exactly. But, that's not the only way to hook your reader. And I
Yeah.
felt like that didn't do much for my characters, because, I may know my characters pretty well, but...
Your reader doesn't.
My reader doesn't know who they are. So starting off with action doesn't give them anything, and, if they get hurt or something, it's why do they care?
Yeah.
So I agree with the whole internal conflict thing, and that's ultimately what I've decided to go with, actually. And this is aside from my prologue. Prologue and first chapter are different.
Yes. This is another point to keep in mind. Prologues and first chapters are completely different objects.
I see my first chapter as, actually getting the story started. The prologue is more of, some information.
Some critical information that you can't really fit in
and
anywhere
it's kind
else.
of ambiguous.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I started off, with an internal conflict with one of my main characters. Not the main character, but she's essential to the plot as well. And it also kind of gives you sort of an idea of the creatures and beings in my world, because she's kind of one of them, and... then you kind of get to know that as well. It kind of explains it a little bit. It gives you a taste of it. And so, that's good.
Yeah. And then, did you find the notes that you were looking for?
Sort of. I think I answered a different one of your questions, but I will say, when I'm stuck, if you haven't noticed, I'm really obsessed with The Darker Shade of Magic. Which she finally read, and I was like, yay! Anyway, so my mom's birthday came up, and my mom really likes it, and she was like, as a birthday gift, I just want to sit down and, analyze The Darker Shade of Magic, because we're both really nerdy like that, so...
Which is why we get along.
Yes. So with my mom, we outlined, we looked like critically.
So like you reverse engineer the outline.
Yeah, and we didn't write it down or anything, so it was kind of fun because we just talked about it. But I felt like I learned like a lot just like looking at it critically. So I think if you're stuck, take your favorite book and go to town because it's really fun.
Yeah, and for me, thinking back about 14 years. The way that it originally started was actually with sexual assault, which was kind of weird.
Fun times.
Yeah. It's changed a bit since then. Because it originally started during Kylara's birthday. But then the next draft, it started basically in what is now the second scene, which is in the glade when Kylara's trying to teach Riley how to waltz.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, I read that.
Yes, you did read that. It was like a year ago, but you read it. No, it was 2 years ago now. Shit.
Whoa.
Right? Right?
What?
Because it's been out for a year.
Oh.
Oh my god.
Right?
Congratulations.
Yeah! Anyway, but I didn't quite feel like it started the way I wanted it to, and it didn't really do the whole grabbing the reader thing, because that scene, like the way that I pictured it, like I visualized things really cinematically, so I kind of figured like a drone shot over a forest with like the opening title.
This isn't a movie yet.
No. We'll see if it ever gets to that point when I'm okay with their adaptation, but probably
if it
not.
is, you know exactly how it should be.
I kind of even know what font should be used. I'm such a fucking nerd. Anyway, so it started sort of like flying over the forest, getting into the glade, and like probably the first line would be something along the lines of "ow," just because Riley stepped on her foot. But
that's funny.
Again, total fucking nerd. But I didn't really feel like it had enough emphasis, so now just the way it opens now is with Dean and Aveline and their whole conversation of like, she's late again, what the fuck is going on, da 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 da, and it's hinting toward a lot of things that I hope are clarified slightly later in the chapter.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm like trying to think back really hard. I'm like, I've read the Walton scene, but I remember starts with the conversation.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah.
And about the whole Aveline being drugged thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember. I got
I remember I gave you notes on that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just like, because when I initially read your story, it started off in the glade, and I was like, you know what? There's like nothing.
There's not really a whole lot of spark there.
Yeah. There's no grab. There's no real context. And
Yeah.
No conflict necessarily.
Yeah. So starting it with like the first line is "damn that girl of yours," which also hints to something that's not revealed until like chapter 8 or something. But it sort of, you kind of automatically get a feeling of like, oh, this is not a happy family.
Yeah.
And that's something that a lot of people can relate to at least a little bit, because I know, like, I love my family dearly, I have a very good relationship with them, but that does not mean it's 100% smooth all the time. It's not how it works. Speaking as the youngest of 3 girls, who's constantly butting heads with her oldest sister, no. But it eventually sort of, yeah, it cuts from, as I'm using cinematic terms again, cuts from the sort of king and queen argument to, yes, she is exactly where Dean thinks she is, and with the people he thinks she's with, and all that, and sort of moves on from there. And then the scene after that is when Brander and Tarek sort of get introduced, and we move on from there.
Remember that.
Yes. But I tried to get it started, like, with just enough time to give a little bit of context as to who the characters were that we were dealing with, but not so much time that it's like, okay, why are there 25 chapters before anything happens? Because pacing is something that you really have to take into account.
Yeah. But I feel like you introduced pretty much all the major players in one go, basically, pretty well, and all was like it flowed well.
I don't think I did too much info dump there.
No info dump, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you introduced your character, like all the main players, for now anyway.
Yeah, like the ones that you need to get the ball rolling.
Exactly. So I think that went pretty smoothly, and I like how you did it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Me too. I just got really tired. So that's why I yawned.
We've also been having a lot of weird side conversations. But anyway, how do you deal with the pressure of the first line? Because there's all these things out there of like, you have to grab the reader in the first line is critical, and you have things like Call Me Ishmael and all these other like great literary works that you have to compare yourself to. So much pressure. And I've already stated my first line, and then I think it kind of goes like, what the fuck is happening here? So the reader gets intrigued, but I'm a little too close to the project to see it, so I hope I did that. How did you feel about yours?
I like my first line. I'm really frustrated with my second line. I stabbed it.
Repeatedly.
Yeah.
With spoon.
Yes, exactly. I don't know. I'm happy with my first line. I'm like starting to doubt it, thinking about it more now. Anyway, my point being, I don't even know what my first line was for my prologue. Oh God, what was it? Anyway, I went with my gut, like I said, when I just because I was really stressing about fixing my prologue, being like, I don't know what to do. So my default thing is just go to a blank page and take a breath and just follow your gut. Because I feel like we all have our gut feelings.
Gut instinct.
Gut instincts, and you've read all these books. Something will come up.
Yeah.
My first line is Tamerlane knew magic was a rare thing. Because I figure you have magic, have the character's name.
Yeah, and then, the latest version of the first chapter that you sent me sort of opens on Farron doing, a magic puppet show type thing, which is really, really cool.
Yeah. Which echoes back to magic.
Yeah.
Which was in the first line. So I'm hoping it's okay. My second line I'm really frustrated with. I had another point. I think as a kid I felt more pressured with the first line. Plus you'd have school assignments where they're like, try to write your line in iambic pentameter.
And I was like, fuck
you!
Which
frustrates me to no end, especially with a school assignment. I think if I really wanted to nerd out, I probably would and restructure it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I feel like you want something that's interesting, that kind of it doesn't have to be a big blast, but something that kind of makes the reader go, oh, basically you want something that will lead them to the next line.
Yeah.
And you want that for the whole book, because every line needs to drag your focus to, not drag your focus, but
encourage your focus.
Yeah, make you want to keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you're saying, it's not always the first line that pisses you off. It might be the second or the third.
Yeah.
And I feel too, when I read a book, I give a book, I'll read, the first line, but then I'll also, even if it's not an interesting first line, I usually read the second line.
Yeah, I typically give it, the first chapter to grab me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, in a bookstore, I'll read the first, paragraph, and then I'll flip to a random page to see, except for that one book that betrayed me. Because she used the same sentence structure, and now I feel like I'm going to read the book and just force myself, but it's...
That's a great first line, except that one book that betrayed me.
Yeah.
Because I was in the store, I read the first paragraph, I read the middle, a couple pages in the middle, thought it was good, sat down to read, and I just keep getting stuck on the same, I don't know what it is, it's like a car that keeps stopping and going.
I know exactly what you mean, because there's a book called The Naming that's, what I've read of it is really, really good, but I always get stuck at the same exact spot and don't pick it up again. I don't know what it is. It's a really good book. It's a really cool concept.
I do that with this
It's
other
well
book.
written.
Because this one I see her repeated sentence structure, and I don't get why, because I know books will use the same.
You have enough of them by now.
Yeah, I know, of course you'll use the same. You can't make a whole book with every single sentence being structured differently. That's not possible.
But you need enough variation not to notice it.
I notice it every 6th paragraph, and I'm just I don't know what it is. Maybe I'll try again. Maybe it will go away. Anyway, sorry to go off on a tangent.
Anyway.
Yeah.
It's the writing Inquisition to go off on tangents.
I could talk about it forever, so you guys go ahead.
For me, I do the same thing you do and just ignore it as much as possible and just fucking write. Because once I start the editing process, then I'll really get into like word choice and all of that stuff like we were talking about with the rules and what is it? Rules and claims.
Yeah.
I promise I'm awake. Sort of. Let's see. I'll just go scene by scene and try to make sure that continuity is a thing, so that like it's still working toward the same goal of telling the story, but it's not wandering off too far off track. But again, once I get to the editing process, then I'll really be like, okay, well, how can I tweak this? How can this work a little bit better? How can I bop this? All that good stuff. And really get down to like the structural crap later.
Let's see here. For me, I haven't written, for my latest one, I haven't written it yet, but I've been thinking heavily about how I'm going to open it up. And since mine's kind of like, it is an internal conflict, but it's also semi-action, so I think I might start off with maybe one of her thoughts that is running through her head, you know, as she's trying to do this thing, or I may just talk about the like what she's trying to do exactly.
Yeah.
I'll just kind of describe it, I guess.
I've found too, I feel like, which I've talked about it in writing classes before, but I feel like if you have, let's say you have an opening scene, and like with Stranger Than Fiction,
Yeah.
he's just waking up, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I feel like if you're writing something, and if you have like a strong character voice or a strong narrative voice that the author feels they can trust, it won't matter if they're not doing something interesting, because you'll already be kind of entranced. I mean, it will matter because if it's really boring.
Yeah, but again, using Stranger Than Fiction example, where you know there's this thing where you don't really want to start with your character waking up, but Stranger Than Fiction opens with Emma Thompson narrating, or her character, I should say, and she's basically reading her work out loud and describing like the way in which he does things and how he is like obsessively counting everything, and like the last thing she says is something along the lines of like the wristwatch is the reason that he dies or something, something along those lines anyway.
Yeah.
But it's going through that very specific, very like, yes, this is a boring person, yes, this is a boring process, but, and getting to that but is really where everything takes off, especially because it's at that point basically that, I want to say his name's Harold?
Yeah.
Starts hearing the narration.
Yeah.
Wait, what? So it's the way in which you tell it that matters more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's...
I love that movie.
I know, it's so good.
I want to rewatch it because I watched it once as a little kid and I loved it, and then I never watched it again.
And now, as a more experienced writer, now you're just like, I must know!
I should watch it.
I think my sister has it. I'm not sure. Next question is, how do you structure your beginning? So what I mean by that is like, how do you figure out the sort of plot arc of your opening? Because obviously you have, you've probably heard of like the Freytag triangle, where you have like the opening, the rising action, the climax, or plateau, and then more rising action, climax, and resolution action, or whatever the fuck it is. A real book has multiple mini versions of that. It's not just one smooth arc, it's a bunch of little ones. Mm-hmm. So for me, again, I open with, damn that girl of yours, and that whole conversation, and then moving on to introducing the person that they're talking about and her friends, and then moving on to, oh, and here's the villain, and here's this other person who might have some sort of impact on the plot. Hero! Little things! And sort of moving through all of that stuff and working in order to get the reader sort of interested and invested and working on that. So we've kind of discussed my structure to death already. What about you?
Yay. Thought a lot about my beginning because I've been really frustrated and I still kind of am. But I'm happy with the overall elements. Anyway, my point being, with mine, I kind of open with an info dump, but I'm hoping it's a nice info dump. It's not exactly an info dump.
Well, you're not
Exposition.
including, like, 80 million little tidbits that everyone needs to know all at the same time.
It's exposition. And I'm thinking of cutting some, but I first need to open with, well, I'll see. But my big thing with my beginning was that there's trains in my fantasy world. Because in the other thing, people would read it, and I would all of a sudden have a cash register, and then everybody's like, well, that seems modern. And I'm like, it's supposed to be modern. So I have it, I'm going to change it, and I'm going to have my character open up and be like, and take out train tickets. So then you're like, trains, and trains are important in the story.
Yeah, and that way you're also going like, there's tech!
Yeah.
Yeah.
Without just saying, there's tech!
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And then I really wanted to introduce obviously the main character and the second kind of main character, and I'm hoping it's kind of funny. And then because at the end of chapter 1, which I might combine it, so it might become the beginning of chapter 1, there's a big action scene. So I'm hoping that you're already hooked from the character leading into the big action scene, I hope, but I'm having a lot of issues because of my brain. But yes, but again, not to harp on A Darker Shade of Magic, I'm trying to kind of copy her because she leaves little breadcrumbs, and I feel like I can do that because I would get a lot of feedback where it'd be like, oh, you're putting in these little mysteries, and I like that, and now I'm just kind of like driving myself crazy. But anyway, so I like to open up, I guess, with a slight conflict, again, I'm rewriting it. I want it to be more ominous, because there's a war.
Yeah, and I've already given you my notes on that,
Yeah.
so like, this needs to be clarified.
Yeah, and I kind of like it when books have, like, you can feel the ripples of everything, or an echo of the bigger conflict is in the beginning of the story. So I'm striving towards that. That's how I do it.
Yeah. And that is a tall order, and you are working really hard to make sure that you can actually fill it.
Thanks. I'm gonna die
And
editing this book.
It's okay, you have us. You have us, we're gonna help you.
Yeah.
Let's see here. So far, my opening kind of consists of internal conflict plus a kind of tragedy that happens, and also introduces like a mysterious object as well as kind of a mysterious person or figure, and
That sounds fun.
an odd thing that happens too. So that's kind of, it like takes you on this sort of like little roller coaster, and you're just like,
Let's do it again.
yeah, exactly. And so that'll probably be like throughout the entire book,
Yeah.
little mini roller coasters all the way until
Yeah.
you get to like the main climax, and it'll be like this big ass drop.
It's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
I thought this was Splash Mountain. This is in fact death.
Yes. Yes. So that's kind of my plan right now. I'm hoping to kind of stick to that.
Yeah. And based on what we workshopped the last time we got together, I think you should be able to do it.
Yeah.
Assuming I'm remembering things accurately. But, you know, we all have to sort of figure out the best sort of entry point to the story and not leave it too long before the ball really starts rolling. Because, like, if we go back to the roller coaster thing, like, I don't know about you guys, but I hate it when a roller coaster takes, like, 10 minutes to go up to the first rise, and then everything goes down.
Yeah.
I much prefer, like, the California Screaming method of, like, okay, we'll go around the corner, we'll get the slingshot done, and then, bye!
Basically, yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing. Or, like, it goes up a little bit, but you're already, like, you know, you're already at, like, a cliff point, but you don't know it.
Yeah.
You know, because you just kind of followed the line and
Yeah.
made your way up there slowly, and then you get onto the ride, you go up a little bit, and then when you're like,
So,
what?
what the fuck just happened? Yeah, so trying to figure out sort of how to get it started without being a pretentious dickwad.
Yeah.
It depends on the story, too.
Yeah.
I think.
Because if you follow a pretentious dickwad, then you kind of have to be the pretentious dickwad.
Yeah. It's all circumstantial.
Yeah, it's all circumstantial. But you want to make sure that regardless of like your opening scene, your opening line, however your story ends up starting, you want it to be something that your readers will, at bare minimum, bear through, but you want them to really like get your hooks in them, basically. Which is a tall order. It's hard.
There needs to be definite hints of interest that go a little deeper than the reader may know.
Yeah.
Because that's why they keep reading it.
Yeah. And again, with that